Hello, friends out there in Parent-Tween Connection. I am back with you. I should say I'm back with you with another awesome guest for our January 2023 roundtable. For those of you I haven't had the opportunity to meet yet, I'm Clarissa Constantine, and I'm the founder of the Parent-Tween Connection. And our mission is to create community for folks who support kids. So think parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, mentors. That's the starting place. Because sometimes you just need moral support. But sometimes we actually need to go to the professionals who can help us when moral support doesn't cut it. So for this interview, we have Allison Maynard from School Smart 101. She is fascinating. She was a school teacher. She had some phenomenally interesting experiences as a teacher. I'll leave it at that. Reach out to her if you'd like more on that code. But she's also now the founder of School Smart 101. So first of all, Allison, thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely. You know, one of the things that I love is that I get to engage with so many awesome human beings who started out in the education profession, whose hearts are absolutely as big as can be. And for whatever reason, the education setting wasn't the right fit for them. And they saw something that was missing, or they saw a challenge in the system as it exists, and they went off and they were trailblazers and started something to help fix whatever the challenges they saw in the school system. And that pretty much, I mean, it's pretty broad, but that kind of describes you, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Right. How long were you in public education all totaled?
17 years. I taught for 9 years at the high school level, and then I taught 8 years at the junior high school level. And then before that, I was student teaching for a year, and I did tutoring. So, I mean, I was literally in a classroom probably 40 out of 45 years of my life. Like, it was a really high number. I was in education in some capacity.
Right. Whether as the student or as the teacher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So to the point of like, the public education system ultimately, after that length of time, didn't fit anymore. And you went in another direction as an entrepreneur to fix a challenge that you saw.
Mm-hmm.
What was that challenge?
Oh, gosh. How do I make it concise?
I was going to say,
there's so much.
Version.
I mean, I'm just going to say it. The public school system is failing. It's failing our kids. It's failing our teachers. It's failing our parents. It's, and COVID really kind of brought all that to the surface. Like, we all knew it was happening.
Challenges.
Yeah, we all knew it was happening. But then COVID with the kids at home, it was like, oh my gosh, what's going on?
Right.
So my big focus when I taught high school, I was always surprised. These kids are 15, 16, 17 years old, and they're coming to me, and I'll be like, read this story, answer these questions, a pretty standard assignment. And I would watch them read in class. We would read together in class, and they couldn't answer the questions. And then I'd ask them to write something, like write a paragraph. What's your opinion? They didn't know how to write, and they couldn't form their own opinion. And I was like, this is weird. So I would ask the kids, why didn't you learn this? You're in high school. You're going to college in a couple years. And a lot of them said they had never been taught how to do those things at the junior high school level. So I, came up with my method, and I started teaching them and having a lot of success in the high school. Well, then I transferred down to the junior high school level. Mm-hmm. And so it gave me a broader perspective. And the kids didn't know how to learn. Same stuff happened, but it was worse because the kids were younger and didn't have as much school under their belt. Because when I taught high school, the older kids, those kids had kind of figured out ways to get through the system. The junior high school kids, not so much. And so I had, kids who had never read a book, who could barely read a sentence. They couldn't write a sentence, even though our pacing guide wanted them to write an essay in the first quarter of the school year. I'm like, they can't even write a sentence. So I kind of came up with this method over the course of my tenure where I taught the kids how to learn. I gave them a foundation for learning. And what ended up happening is that I saw a decrease in some of the behavior issues, because I think a lot of behavior issues stem from the fact that the kids don't know what to do. So when they don't know what to do, and so they act up. So they get that, they're getting the attention, even if it's negative attention. So I came up with this method of teaching my kids how to study, how to critically think, how to read, how to write, and how to control and regulate their emotions. And what ended up happening is not only were they successful in my classroom, they started improving in their other classes as well. And then
Makes
they
sense.
would, and then they would, go on to high school and stuff. And I would get messages from former students and they're like, oh my gosh, I saw this in class and I thought of you, or I knew how to do this assignment because of what we learned in your class.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty fulfilling. But then what I realized is, all right, the schools aren't teaching this, and it's a complicated answer as to why they're not. But a lot of it has to do with because of Common Core and No Child Left Behind, those two big names in education. We have standards that we have to teach, and our pacing guides are packed with so much stuff that you're go, 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 go. So, and the standards aren't teaching kids really how to formulate opinions or take notes and stuff. So you've got these teachers who are trying to get everything done in this pacing guide to check the boxes so they're ready for
the standardized exams. Yep.
Yeah, because testing and attendance are really the two things that gets the money to the schools.
Yep, that drives the revenue. Absolutely.
So
I love it.
So a lot of teachers, they're doing the best that they can. And, they try to embed study skills and stuff.
Sure.
A lot of schools have turned to an AVID model, but that's only for a certain group of kids. That's not
right.
for the whole, that's
not, not for everyone.
Family. No. So, we need to teach our kids really how to learn and how to think and how to do these things before we expect them to do the things. And so I created, I took my method and I filmed an online course, and it's specifically for parents to help them be able to support their kids at home when they're struggling with homework.
And that's a segue, because one of the things that I know you and I have talked about is like, there's only so much that the teachers can do in the schools, especially once we get to the junior high or middle school level, because the kids are moving from teacher to teacher to teacher. So each teacher has a significantly smaller chunk of time during which to influence the students in a school day, like leaving extracurriculars and mentorship and whatnot out of it. But the parents are still the same parents. Like they go home to the same parents every night. And I know one of your big like flags that you wave is that parents have to be involved in the learning process. And I think this is important because what I've seen over a long time myself is that understandably parents are like, okay, but I'm an accountant. I know how to do taxes. Or I'm an attorney. I know the law. You're the teacher. You know how to educate my child. Or on the other side, if we're talking about families like immigrant families who, are doing everything they can, maybe they don't speak the language, or maybe they don't, they themselves didn't have the opportunity to get the education they might have liked and are trying to provide that option. They might look at it and be like, oh, but you're the teacher. I'm not. Right. Yeah. And so there's this deference or delegation, whatever, on either, whatever perspective of it. You're the professional, do your job.
Yeah. And sadly, we're in a time now that if you really want to guarantee your kids are going to have a shot to be successful, parents have to get involved. The schools they're not cutting it anymore. Like, let's just go, what's going on in today's schools? Like, let's just start with school shootings. Like, we'll just go there. When I got into teaching, I think I started in 2003, we did not have active shooter drills. We didn't start, I just got the chills even starting to talk about this because it upsets me so much. My first, oh my gosh, I may cry. My first active shooter drill, like I was in my classroom crying because I'm like, I didn't get into the profession for this. Like,
for sure,
the odds are really low, but there's now like, you can't guarantee you can send your kids to school and not know they're going to come home that day. It's a very real, it's a very real problem in America. So, when Uvalde happened, for example, which was at the end of the school year, I can guarantee for those last 3 weeks of most schools that occurred after, there was not much learning going on. You've got teachers in trauma responses. You've got kids in trauma responses. And everybody's just like, all right, like, let's just try to make everything normal. So you've got that going on. You've got the pressure for testing going on. COVID, did a number. It did a tremendous disservice to our kids because there were so many kids at home that weren't doing the learning. And so we had a regression in learning. We had a regression in reading and math. We had a regression in behavior issues. So a lot of schools, a lot of teachers feel more like that they are babysitters,
Mhm.
and they are, they're checking the boxes and they're tracking data. They're not really teaching. They're doing,
Right.
again, they're doing the best they can. This is not the fault of the teachers. This
Right.
is a
It's the
system.
system.
It's a
Mhm.
systemic problem. And
Yep.
then you've got issues today where it's really hard nowadays to suspend or expel a student anymore.
Mhm.
So, I've read stories about kids who have knives in class, who
Yeah.
sexually assault other students,
Mhm.
who are back in class the next day.
Right.
So, and they do this to the teachers and the
Right.
students, but they do it to teachers. So if I'm a teacher and I have a kid that threatens me with a knife and ends up back in my class that day, like, am I really giving 110% to all my other
Absolutely.
students? I'm doing
Yep.
the best that I can. But in the back of my head, all I'm thinking about is when is that kid going to come after me? I mean, look, there was that
Absolutely.
teacher just a couple weeks ago that got shot by our first grade student.
Mhm.
And there had been warnings, like she had expressed concern and he had smashed her cell phone the week before.
Right.
And that kid was still in her class. And look what
Right.
ended up happening. And the sad
Yeah.
thing is nothing's going to change. And so when you have, and there's so many other issues,
Right.
when you have all of these different issues, do you really think your child is getting 100% of the
That makes
education
sense. Yeah.
that they deserve? And the answer, sadly, is no, they're not. I mean, and don't get me wrong, there are some schools out there that are doing a fabulous job.
Absolutely.
I get that. And
It's-
there are some teachers who are absolutely amazing. But overall, is every single teacher and every single school your child is in giving your kids what they need? And in
Right.
most cases, the answer is no. And how do you fill in the gaps? Well, you can hire a tutor,
Sure.
but that gets really costly. And
Mhm.
it's hard to stay consistent with tutoring. If
Yeah.
you teach the parents some basic skills, like, I don't even think it's that difficult. I think if you teach parents early enough how to do a few things and you do it
Along the way.
consistently and
Right.
you do it for a very, very long period of time, you're going to see that your kids can go into class and answer questions. They know how to read something and formulate an opinion about it. And that's the basis for pretty much anything that we do.
Right. So here's the question then, right? Like, so you just gave an example of, like, if we start early enough, a lot of the folks watching this are likely the parents of the 6th through 12th grade, maybe some 4th and 5th graders. I don't think we have many who have younger than that in the Parent Tween Connection world. But if they're like, hey, I'm not the teacher, clearly you've made your case plain as day as to what it's really like. And, like, we know it, but sometimes we don't put it all together. So putting it all together like this, it's intense. I get that I need to do it, but I'm not a teacher. I don't have a curriculum. I suck at math, like, in my own head, right? Like, there's plenty of people who say that, or, like, or I'm dyslexic and I struggle with reading, or whatever the case may be. I know you propose that folks can still get engaged even without a curriculum or even without an education degree. What are some things that we could do? Like, let's say they haven't been doing as much and we're in that, like, 5th, 6th and on. How do they suddenly get involved?
The easiest way that's free is you start engaging your kids in questions.
Okay.
That's it. You just ask questions. Not how was your day?
Okay.
Because you get stuff like fine.
Uh-huh.
And you need to give them some really specific questions. And I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later on in more detail, but just a really simple example. Instead of asking your child, how was your day? What was your favorite moment in school today? And the key is asking why. They need to explain the reasoning behind it with the because. What ends up happening, and it's gonna look ugly at first, especially if you've never done it. Like, and that's, I mean, it may take a few days, it may take a few weeks, but when you start doing it consistently, a few times a day, every day, start with once a day and then build up to it. You don't have to, oh my gosh, I need to ask like 8 million questions all the time. No, just a couple questions a day. And you'll be amazed over time what your kids will start to share with you. And the bonus to this is it starts engaging you and your kids in communication, which in adolescence is so, so important. So by using questions about, non-threatening things like, if they like football, and then you find things that they like, if they like, but what did you think about the end of that football game? Oh, blah, 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 blah. Well, then, you're getting engaged, you're engaging with your children, you're learning about what they like. And then when the bad things start happening, because bad things are going to happen, it's just a fact of life. You've got social media, school shootings again, you've got TikTok and all the things. When things start going sideways, they're going to feel more comfortable coming to you.
Agreed.
Talking to you about it because you've established lines of communication.
Correct. Yeah.
And you're talking, and everybody's not on their phone all the time.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Which is a huge, this is disconnecting everybody. And the disconnection is where a lot of the issues are happening with our kids. They're not learning.
For sure.
Mental health issues is a really huge thing that's on the really terrifying rise in our teenagers.
Well, and especially since COVID, there's been that's a whole other conversation. So, so then, okay, so we know we need to get involved. We know why we need to get involved, and that even if we don't have an education background, or maybe we haven't even made it as far as our kids are right now, depending on our circumstances, just asking questions. The other thought that I had was what was your favorite day? What was your least favorite day? But then also, I know a lot of parents are like, wow, I haven't used that math in forever. At least most of us still have to read or do some kind of communication on a daily basis. But oftentimes, man, those math skills get rusty as can be. What about even asking your kiddo to explain to you and be like, I don't remember this. Can you explain it to me? Even if you do remember it?
Yeah, no, I mean, when you look at the ways that people retain information, the number one way to retain information is to teach it to somebody else. And that was one of the things that I would do in my classroom. I would take, the kids that were really high and bored, I would have them go teach, the kids that were struggling. Because I had a lot of neurodivergent students over, especially when I taught junior high school. And so those high kids would be working with those kids who were struggling learners, and they would remember that information even better. So asking your kids to explain a concept, or if you both are rusty on it, go online together and do some research and try to figure it out together. I mean, there's so much information out there now, and YouTube is a great source for lessons in pretty much anything. Changing oil in your car, math, all of the things are there. It's another great opportunity for you and your child to sit down and work on something together, which I think is really important in adolescence as well.
Oh, for sure. Because that's all, it's time together, and it's side by side time together that isn't necessarily, I mean, it can be, but it's not always as fraught with emotion as other situations can be. So a lot of what you do is helping them with some of those foundations, those foundational skills, the processing, the reading, the processing responses. One of the things I know you talk about is how to help families establish foundations of learning in the first place. And it's common among a number of folks that I know who are in the space of helping kids with study skills and study habits and executive functioning coaching, and kind of all in that general realm of kids need to understand how to learn, but I think there's also a why to that as well. Why does this matter? If I had a nickel for every time a kid said to me, why do I need to know fractions?
I don't need to know this. Yeah.
Right. So what's your perspective on the how versus the implementation, the actual happening of learning?
I mean, the why am I learning that? I mean, there's some stuff that I think is being taught in schools that's absolutely ridiculous. And it's kind of hard to be like, well, you've got to do it. I think to answer that question, if you know how to learn, you have way more opportunities in the future down the road. This is the long game. And I think this is another issue we have today too. Everybody wants a quick answer and they want it now.
Sure.
That's, that doesn't happen. So if you can explain to your kids in a way that they understand, over time, you're going to have more opportunities if you know how to learn. You can go to college if you want. If you don't want to go to college, because college is not the answer for everybody nowadays,
Correct.
you can create your own path, but you need to know how to do certain skills in order to create your own path. So you need to be able to communicate. So explaining the long game, I think for some kids is relevant.
And so then some of the hows, like you've talked about, like, asking them questions and then really encouraging them to explain their thinking with the because, and, why do you think that? Or what else do you think? Or like take a point that they've made and ask another question about that point. It's not just creating the connection, but it's forcing them to think and work through the process of then articulating their ideas. What other types of skills or examples do you have that parents can support at home that will make the learning that is happening in the schools more accessible and more successful for them?
I mean, I think consistency, and some established routines. This is the time that we're going to sit down and study. This is the time we're going to read as a family. This is the time, we're going to turn on a movie, but we're going to have the subtitles on and we're going to talk about it, afterwards. Those are some simple, free things that you don't need to do much with. To stay focused.
Can I interject?
Yeah.
From the writing perspective and the reading perspective, if you do that movie with subtitles idea, another really cool question that you could ask is, like, if you pause the movie and you ask, what do you think is going to come next? Being able to think ahead is an incredibly valuable skill as a reader, but also just in life. So
making predictions.
And even going back and thinking about, like, okay, well, this actor or this character just did blah, 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 pausing and being like, what would you have done differently in that situation to get them thinking about alternatives? Or if it's like a whodunit kind of movie, pausing and being like, was it Mrs. Flowers in the library or something?
Well, and then I like the ones where you get to a certain point and you go, let's go back and watch that again. Do you notice anything different? Or, we're getting deep on this one, but why did they choose that particular song? Or, like there's so much you can do with that. Or you could watch the same movie a second time and be like, okay, so you watched it. Now let's watch it from the perspective of a different type of person. Like, okay,
that's
so
a great thought.
Yeah. So you're watching a movie and you're a robber, you're a criminal. So you're watching. So what do you think a criminal might think? So now you're doing things with perspective and point of view, which is really important as you get older, because, when you're interacting with people, you have to consider other people's point of view. So like, these are just, and the best part is there's no right or wrong answer to this. And that's the other thing I think a lot of people get caught up on, is there has to be right or wrong. No, these are open-ended questions. They're low risk. And so again, the more you engage your kids with this, the more they're going to be apt to answer the questions. And I can guarantee you a lot of the questions that are being asked, at least in English classes, have to do with, what is this character's point of view? From what perspective is the story being told from? So, what is the symbolism of this color? So if you start having those conversations at home, it's going to carry into school, and it'll probably start making homework time easier, because the kids know what the expectation is and they've been exposed to that kind of thinking.
That's awesome. I love that. I never thought about using movies that way. All right. So it's clear that you and I could talk for absolutely ever. And unfortunately, we do not have forever today. So we're going to wrap up with one final question for you, Allison. And that is, which of the Parent Tween Connection foundations of connection resonates the most? So I'm going to take a pause for a second. And I'm going to say, for anybody watching or listening, if you're not familiar with the foundations of connection, these literally came out of a conversation that I had with myself several years ago. That I was like, why is it that my students, and I've been in the test prep higher education world for 2.5 decades now, why is it that my kids feel comfortable talking to me about things that they're not ready to talk to mom or dad or their aunt or uncle about? And so the thoughts that came out, I was able to basically fit into the acronym connection. The first letter of each of these, the first letter of each phrase spells out connection. So here we go. It's create a safe place, observe, non-judgment, nod and smile, as in like zip it. Explore. I sometimes also use that to the E to mean educate. Challenge your truths or curiosity. Take your time. Innovate. Own your own story, and nurture. So I always ask our guests, which one's popping for you?
Curiosity.
Love it. Tell me why.
Because, I mean, here we are talking about asking questions. And I really think when you teach kids, you start teaching them how to ask and answer. You're asking and answer questions. They're going to start asking more questions too. Especially, I think about little kids. Like they're asking questions. What is this? What does this mean? Da, 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 da. They lose that along the way somewhere.
Yep.
They do. It's what happens as the kids hit adolescence. But if you start to bring it back in adolescence, they're going to start to ask more advanced questions. Now, beware. They may start asking you some questions that make you a little uncomfortable, but be open to that. And I think curiosity is just so important. And because our kids are just passively on these all the time, they're losing that curiosity. And curiosity is what is so innovative for the future. That's where all the new grand ideas come from. We have to foster curiosity in our kids, or else we're not going to progress as a society and as humans.
Absolutely. Well, and I've also, during the run of the roundtable, one of the reasons I love that we have the Parent-Tween Connection Talks podcast, and why I wanted to do the roundtable this month, is I am absolutely among the most curious folks you'll ever meet, but it gives me the opportunity to talk with such an array of professionals, including you, like today. And so many of the parenting coaches who are more like coaching about relationships, less about, education-based stuff, but they always say, get curious about your kid. Because I think we all fall into the pattern, even teachers who work with students for whatever period, right? We feel like we know these kids. And what we forget sometimes is that as human beings, we and they evolve.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So if we can work and train our brains to be curious about the evolution of the other person, then make us set a goal for yourself. One of the conversations we had was set a goal to find one new thing about your kid every day, something that I didn't know, that's fascinating, or something like that. It supports their curiosity, not only about knowledge but also about people, which is a human skill, so I love it. Awesome. Okay, we are going to wrap up this portion of the conversation. If you are in the Parent-Tween Village, we are going to go do another live stream there. We're going to be talking even more about questions, one of my favorite topics, and how to further engage your kids, even when you don't have a curriculum, how you can dig in deeper and get them engaging and interacting with you. And if you are watching this and you are not yet part of Parent-Tween Village, you can find out more about that at parenttweenconnection.com. Among the perks of membership there is that you get a ton of exclusive interviews just for our folks. So with that, Allison, thank you so very much for your time today. And I look forward to digging in more about questions.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.